started. Make sure you use the microphone.
Is this good? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. I didn't know what to expect in terms of attendance. I didn't know if we were going to have a couple of people or a full room. So obviously we have plenty of space. I'm glad to see you all. Thanks for coming out this evening. My name is Jen Connors. I work for EWEB in the Communications and Public Affairs Department. And I'm just going to kind of kick things off with a couple of housekeeping items before I turn things over to the real stars of the show here. So first, some quick introductions. So your speakers tonight, the stars, are our general managers, Frank Lawson from EWEB and Scott Coe from Plain Electric. And then a couple of other folks in the room I'll point out. We have Mindy Schlossberg, who is EWEB's Commissioner at Large, representing all EWEB customers. And then we also have Kathy Keeble. Hi, Kathy. Kathy is Lane Electric's McKenzie District Director. And then Dean Lively Brooks, who is the board president for Lane Electric. Okay. And then we have a couple of other utility folks in the room. So Deborah Hart is our EWEB's Assistant General Manager and Chief Financial Officer. And then various staff just kind of spread around. Raise your hand if you work for EWEB or Lane Electric and haven't been introduced yet. So if you need anything throughout the meeting, just flag one of us down. So Holly, could you put the agenda up, please, for the next slide? So here's what we're here to talk about tonight. So Frank and Scott will provide some information about the study that is underway, the territory transfer or realignment study, and some of the key facts and considerations, and then cover the anticipated timeline for the work. And then we hope to have about 30 minutes at the end for Q&A. So plenty of time to get your questions answered. I would ask, if possible, hold your questions to the end so that Frank and Scott can get through their material, and also for our technology, the microphones, and we've got the handhelds, and there's a microphone in the middle of the room and all of that. So it'd just be easier to do it that way. And then I just wanted to take a moment, Holly, can you go to the next slide, and just talk about customer input and explain how this decision process is going to be made and how your input and other customer and member input will be used in that process. So obviously final decisions aren't going to be made in this room tonight. The decisions will ultimately be made by the elected boards of both utilities with guidance from their general managers. So our mission tonight is to hear from you. And we really want to focus on your questions and what you value in your utility provider. And we know that you all bring diverse perspectives and experiences into the room. So we'll be documenting what we hear tonight. We'll be taking some notes. This will be recorded and posted after the meeting. And your questions and input will be summarized and provided to both utility boards. So that's really it for me. Before I turn it over to Frank, I also want to acknowledge that we hopefully have some people watching virtually, watching this live streamed. So for those of you who may be watching virtually, you will see just the slides during the presentation. You won't see speakers, but when we switch to Q&A, you'll see the room. It will switch automatically to a room view. And if you're watching the live stream, you won't be able to ask questions or interact with the meeting, but your input and questions are just as important. So our websites are on the slide and are available, will be available after the meeting as well. So you can use these links to provide your feedback or submit questions directly to your utility. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank Lawson.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Everybody hear me okay? Well, I'm Frank Lawson, the General Manager of EWEB. Really is nice to see everybody out taking an interest in this. Appreciate the attendance of our governance as well. I wanted to just give you a little bit of overview as to kind of the scope of what we're looking at, the discussions we're having, some of the criteria that we're considering. When we talk about a service territory, kind of what does that mean? What are all the details? that can go into a decision like this. And I'll start with a little bit of background. Most of you know EWEB really started in 1911. And so this has been part of EWEB's territory since that point. Really, when you think about 3,000 customers is about 3% of our customer base. But you can look, it's a pretty significant part of the territory from a size perspective. And so when we think about the decisions we make, the infrastructure, in many ways, we're thinking about the balance between Eugene and the McKenzie Valley. And those are things that we have to consider as we go along. If you followed EWEB for a while, I say for a while, this is a very similar discussion that has come up through the years. I think there was a discussion pretty seriously in 2012, a territory realignment similar to this. There were a number of complications that did not really see that through. Both utilities are in a different position now. There's a lot of differences between where the assets lie, where the territories are, and some other things. So go ahead. As far as some of the considerations, both utilities really have approached this and really appreciate Scott doing the same thing. Our communications team is looking at this and saying, we want to walk through this journey and be really transparent with what's going on, what we're thinking about, what the considerations are. And there's a number of governance and representation, for example, is something we've heard from EWEB for a number of years. For as many years as I've been at EWEB since 2010, we've always recognized that while we have a commissioner, Commissioner Schlossberg, who's our at-large commissioner, is not responsible for a specific ward in Eugene. She has a large territory. She has not just Eugene, but also those who are not in Eugene. But there's no direct voting representation, whereas in Lane Electric, there would be. And so that's a consideration that both utilities are looking at. We understand rates are important, so we're looking at and trying to understand how customers perceive rates and what are the rate impacts. Infrastructure and investment plans. I know that that involves not just the capitalization of that, the investment in it, but also the service of it. And Scott's going to run through a number of different pieces around service and how the assets can be managed. We also know that the broader the territory, when you have scale, you can interconnect your system slightly differently. And so there can be some opportunities to link different parts of the McKenzie Valley under one organization where maybe it wouldn't happen under two separate organizations. And so, and then outage response, many of these things, we're comparing notes, we're working together. Scott's got plans, and as well as our own plans and what that means from a resource perspective, from a not just resources, from a infrastructure, but also human resources, service people, all those impacts. And so lots of different considerations. We've probably got 1,000 things on our checklist that we are going through. Lots of details, even to the point where you're assessing probably several hundred easements, for example. How do you handle easements that have existed for 100 years in some cases, written in very unique ways, by the way. Some of these old easements are pretty interesting. But all of this is going to be transparent. We're going to be having more public meetings with our boards and updates. We'll run through the schedule here in a little bit. But I just wanted to give you just a high level view of the different things that we're considering: assets, service, costs, infrastructure, and how those things will all play together under a potential realignment. So, Scott, you want to talk a little bit more about?
Sure.
I think most of these people know EWEB since we've been here for 100 years. So you get to tell them what the possibility might be.
That sounds great. So if you can't tell, Frank and I have been around each other a long time, and I've appreciated the working relationship we have.
I gotta say this, people say we look alike.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't know this, but we switched shirts before we got here. I'm actually Scott Coe.
Again, I'm Scott Coe, and I worked 24 years at Bonneville Power and had a lot of different roles there and enjoyed myself. But kind of got a little stale and decided I want to try something different. So in 2012, I became the general manager at Emerald PUD and did that for 9 years. And if you don't know Gene Anderson here, you haven't lived in the service territory for more than a year.
We honestly,
He knows everybody up here. But Gene retired as a lineman from Emerald PUD while I was there. And has stayed in touch. In fact, worked through the last ice storm for Emerald PUD. So it's always nice to have extra hands when you get into those situations. So after 9 years at Emerald, I retired and was not happily retired. I was ANSI retired. And when my predecessor, Debbie Wilson, retired, I applied on that job and ended up getting selected 6 months ago. But in that case, I have worked with Frank ever since he became the GM at EWEB. And so when I announced in Facebook or LinkedIn, I don't remember which he replied to, I put on there that I was coming back to work. I'm going to be the general manager at Lane Electric, and got a whole bunch of replies from people I've worked with. And Frank's reply was, we should get together. We should have lunch. When you get down here, let's have lunch. And so that's kind of going to be what I talk about. By the way, I made him buy. And so Frank's message was, and I remember this from when I was at Emerald, although obviously I wasn't engaged, but I remember the previous attempt to bring the McKinsey Valley together that failed, as Frank mentioned. And so I was aware that had happened before. And so it turned out I found the big thick file in the GM office that had all the paperwork and the emails and the studies and everything. So after I had lunch with Frank, I started looking through that. I'm like, well, you know what? I can see things have changed a lot since then. So let's go one more slide, I think. So there's the service territory. I had a couple more slides. After Frank and I had lunch, the first thing that we wanted to do, I've been up in this area. I know this area somewhat, but I haven't looked at it from a perspective of poles and wires and homes and streets and vegetation. And so the operations manager and the vegetation or the right-of-way manager and I all got in an unmarked vehicle and drove around the service territory to see what it looked like. And I'm just going to tell you, we were really impressed with how EWEB is taking care of the maintenance of this area. I know other utilities, we would have been less enthusiastic about coming in as the provider behind them, but I think this service territory has been well taken care of with vegetation management. And Dean and I were commenting on the way up here on 126, how many pole replacements have happened and really just how good the system looks. So from our perspective at that point, we kind of took a deep breath and said, you know what, this is something we really should take to the board and start talking to them about what they think about it. So I wanted to talk a little bit, if any of you have been around, and I know a couple people mentioned is Herb going to be here. So one of the models that a rural utility typically has is we have servicemen that are embedded within the service area because it's such a long drive to bring someone out, from the city or from headquarters. We are in West Eugene. We're actually not too far away from EWEB. This is kind of our current model. We have Herb, who's up in the upper McKinsey, if you will, but because we only have 1,200 meters up there, that's not enough work for him. So we have Herb driving all the way down here to Cottage Grove and down into Brown River and whatnot. And so his daily job may involve a lot of miles and not a lot of kind of time working on the ground. And I talked to our fleet manager the other day, and Herb wins the prize every year for the most miles put on a rig. He puts 30 to 35,000 miles on a rig every year. And one of the great benefits that we see for the McKinsey is, I think the next slide will help me on that, is splitting up and adding a fourth serviceman who again will have their vehicle at home and respond to outages and other needs for our members. But Herb would then only have the McKinsey. He wouldn't have to drive all the way down south and do all that stuff far away, which would be better for our current McKinsey members, as well as you folks that are EWEB customers right now, because Herb will be right here and be able to help you. But there's one more benefit. We think, and we're going to wait until the board says yay or nay on moving forward with this. But as we talk to our crews, we actually have two linemen that live inside the EWEB service territory now, and we have one that lives right on the border of Springfield And he's very interested in being the serviceman. So we'd have a serviceman at each end of the McKenzie Valley, which would really speed up some response times for some of the issues that come up. So I think that'd be another good benefit for both current lane and the future EWEB people. The other thing I would say, so I do talk a bit, I love to walk around the office. I hate to stay in my little office, and Gene will tell you that. I'm out in the field at Paramount, and I love to talk to anyone that'll listen to me or will talk to me. And I was talking to our foreman that lives right off Good Pasture Island Bridge. Some of you may know who he is, but we'll keep that. Miles. I asked him how well he knows the service territory, and what I didn't know was he actually used to be on the vegetation management crews for EWEB, and he worked this McKenzie Valley area. He knows every road, every pole, and it's because that's one of my concerns is if we get fallout, do we know how to respond? Do we know where things are? And we will, and he is going to make sure that if we move down this direction, the rest of the crews know where everything is. So when we're coming out here knowing what we're coming out to take care of. So I think that is a hallmark of us as a smaller utility. It's a little more difficult at EWEB with, I don't know, 70 linemen or something. You guys have a big crew, you have a big area. We've got like 13 linemen, we'll probably get one or two more. They tend to, I say they almost name the poles because they actually really know the area so well. So I think that'll serve the area well too. And one more thing, and Frank alluded to this, and it's kind of the value of the two systems joining together. So if you look here, you can see right now EWEB serves out of, and I don't have it on here, but Holden Creek, the substation you see over here on 126, it's so nice. It's a beauty. I think it's a beauty. And it feeds up this way and then it dead ends. And so if anything happens in this distance, it takes everyone on that line out. If you go up here to where the farm is, where McKenzie Community Center is, if you know where that is, that's the end of EWEB. And you'll see there's 4 poles and they have communication lines on them. They don't have electricity on them because that's the end of EWEB. And at the end of that farm, that's where we start up. That gap is just 4 spans apart. And what we plan to do in short order is electrically connect the two systems so that if we have a problem with our Blue River substation, which is fed by Bonneville, and we just had that, right, Kathy? Just had an outage because of Bonneville. We can feed it all the way from Holden Creek all the way up here, and vice versa. If something's happening down this way, we can backfeed it the other way. So it'll give some improved reliability for both sets of customers if we bring the systems together. And then rates are a big deal, right? I get that. I got to tell you, Frank and I have a fun relationship. I actually sent him my EWEB bill this morning and told him, you guys got to get these things under control. How can you afford this? It was $43. I was gone and I turned off my water heater. But, and we'll get this out there on for you to look at in more depth. But under our current rates, Lane Electric has a $49 residential monthly charge and EWEB's is $30. So initially you're going to go, oh, our rates are going up, but you don't pay rates, you pay a bill. And it turns out they have a slightly higher kilowatt hour charge. And as you see, Lane Electric's more expensive if you're a 500 kilowatt hour user. You move to 1,000, it gets within about $3 to $4 of each of us. And then at 1,500, it starts where our rate structure ends up creating a lower bill for people. Nowhere along here, unless you're up here, I hope none of you are at 3,500 kilowatt hours, but you might be. But even at that, it's still only $14 difference. So our rates are pretty close together. So I don't think you're going to see a dramatic change if this deal comes together. And then timeline wise, as Frank said, there's a lot of pieces of the pie we're still putting together. And for us at Lane Electric, we have a board workshop on October 15th where we're going to sit down and really go through all of those finer details. We kind of have the big picture figured out pretty well. but we're gonna go through and talk about, well, what does this mean at a finer level? We're doing that with our staff right now, actually to help feed our presentation when we get to the board. I actually met with all the inside folks today and we talked about, well, what are some of the issues you see coming forward that we need to at least know how we're gonna handle them, right? So that we have a smooth transition. And so as we go through, we plan to kind of complete all that work, get some board yes or no in October and move forward to, you guys, EWEB's down here, finalize the contract late this year or early next year. And the big thing would be, we're looking at a May 1st handover if we decide to go forward with this, this proposal. May 1st, and I'll tell you why May 1st, I had this just flashing in my head when I was trying to go to sleep one night, and it was 4th of July weekend, and I realized we are not changing on the 1st of July. Everyone is on vacation at work. And then I thought, oh, how many more months do we have where the 1st of the month doesn't work out so good? And it came down to like, May 1st is it, maybe. That's like the best month of the year. Anything else is kind of, you know, February 1st, we might be in the middle of a storm and we don't want to take over the service territory if the storms happen and half of it's laying on the ground.
We're okay with that.
I think that was our last slide up here.
You want me to take it?
Okay, anyway, we'll have some Q&A here in a minute, but I'll hand it back to Jen.
I don't really need to do this part, but sure. I love a microphone. What could I say? So, you know, that's kind of the basics of the presentation. So now we're going to switch into the Q&A mode. So want to hear from you. What questions do you have? What's important to you in your utility provider? So these are just a couple of prompt questions, but mainly, this is your time to talk to Frank and Scott. You know, in recent meetings, EWEB and Lane Electric have heard feedback about restoration times, rates, representation on the board. So, you know, we know those are important. What else matters to you in your utility service provider? What priorities and considerations should general managers and elected officials be aware of? So one thing I'll say just from a housekeeping perspective is that thing in the middle of the room there is going to pick up audio from the room, as well as the mic. So if there's like conversations going on, it will start like swiveling around and not be sure where to direct the audio. So when you have a question, raise your hand, someone will bring you the mic, and that way we'll be sure that the recording is clear and people watching virtually can hear you. And also that has a camera. So when you're asking a question, hope you're not camera shy because it will swivel at you and you'll be on. So with that, time for Q&A.
So Jen, just one thing that I know that neither Scott or I touched on was part of the consideration that we're going through is evaluating where we are with a number of customer programs. So energy efficiencies, loans, deposits, you know, all of those things are part of what we're going to have to figure out how to disposition and handle under any kind of a transition. That doesn't include, I'll say, non-electric related things that EWEB does, for example, septic loans and some of these kinds of things. It only would pertain to anything that's specifically tied to electric consumption or the electric service. And so I just wanted to mention that because neither one of us touched on it, but it's one of the 1,000 details that we have to figure out so that customers can be have a good continuity of service if there is a transition. So just wanted to mention that ahead of time.
Good evening, gentlemen. I was here for the first lane presentation. I really enjoy the concept of on-site or in territory service personnel. My only question is, as you mentioned, your upriver power station is also BP. At what point do the two locations come together on BP's servicing the southern part of the state?
So
In other words, if BP goes down, at what point above it do we both lose both of them?
So there are several, so Bonneville Power Administration, who you're referring to, Bonneville Power, they are the transmission provider into this area, and they have several points of delivery not just one. So they deliver at Blue River, they deliver at the substation that Scott mentioned, which is, we call Holden Creek. It's the one right near the Liebert Powerhouse. It also, there's an interconnection to transmission at the Walterville substation and then at the Thurston substation. So there's some of those come from other sources, but there is quite a bit of dependency on Bonneville from that direction. But there's also Cougar and Carmen Smith on the other end. So both utilities have worked with Bonneville through a number of years as to how we handle when they have to do maintenance on the line, for example. So there's a number of different options to that, either generators or new controls at some of those remote generation sites to backfeed the other direction. But there's multiple points of delivery, but it is still the transmission system, and it's somewhat radial out into the Mackenzie Valley. I'd love to say that Bonneville wants to connect the Mackenzie Valley with the valley to the south here that goes out 58. They've had some discussions on that through the years, but the backlog that BPA has right now, just in general transmission, it's going to be 20 years before they even get to something like that.
One other part of that is your resident service personnel, and great news to have one on both ends. What kind of equipment do they have resident with them? Parts, supplies, that sort of thing?
Great question. So, Herb and our servicemen usually keep stuff that does kind of minor tasks and can usually get like a service drop that goes to a home. If something goes wrong, they can usually get that back up and running in pretty short order. I think the real benefit is, if there's a bigger outage, and let's say a car on pole, you know, that's kind of
Our frequent 126.
unfortunately it is, but a car on pole, you know, Herb or the other servicemen get there. And the great part is, if we know it's a car on pole, we're gonna be rolling the on-call crews, assuming it's after hours, but even if it's during hours, we're gonna be rolling the other crews. And as they're going to the office, Herb's assessing what they need to pick up. So if it's like a transformer, they know exactly which transformer to grab out of the yard, grab it, come up here. And it really cuts down the response time because we aren't rolling a crew out here, figuring out what's wrong, and then someone has to come from headquarters and bring it back out. So I think even if they don't carry a lot on their truck particularly, it does increase the response time and getting the power back on.
Thank you.
Hi. Is it happening? Yes, okay. The question I would have is, what is the average consumption of electricity in a residential home in this neck of the woods here that EWEB now supplies and is laying made? Because I've noticed that the first 2 levels, it's going to be more expensive for the consumer.
Well, exactly right. The first 2 levels, I think, are within $5 and then $3. So it's not dramatic, but you're right. It is more money if you're below 1,000 kilowatt hours. I think for our system, it's an average throughout the system of 1,300 or so kilowatt hours. And I'm not sure what it is, but I suspect it's similar. And the reason I would say that is I don't think there's any natural gas in the EWEB service territory up here. So typically those homes are pretty much the same as ours, which is space heat and water heat done typically by electric. So I would expect it to be about the same, but maybe.
Ours is in the same range. I think our overall average is about 1,200 or so, 1,250. We have to know that in town with apartments and other things, that pulls that down a little bit. When we look at single family residences, if you do have residential heat, you know, typical home's going to be 1,700. But then if you have propane or wood, it probably pulls that down. It is probably overall in that 1,300 to 1,500 range for this part of our territory. But there's things that kind of, obviously individual situations are slightly different, but that's about the average.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the questions. I hooked up to EWEB in 1975, so I've been over a 50-year member. And the canal goes right through my property. I have a few questions about rates. The first one is, we've been hearing a lot of chatter about EWEB going to raise the rates up here for this area because obviously it costs a lot more to provide the electricity up here. Is that true? And how much would the rate per kilowatt run?
So, we do plan to propose to our board in November, December, that we would have a separate rate for the rural part of our territory here, because the cost drivers, are significantly different. I don't know the exact difference. I know that when we did the analysis in 2020 or 2021, I think it was 2020, it was about a 13 to 15% difference, higher to serve out here. And so we'll have to run through that analysis again and see where it lands, but that's where it was a few years ago. And we do plan to do that analysis, and present that for consideration to our board.
And the second question is about rate.
Well, could we stay on rates for a minute? And you mind if I take a second on
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
Okay, so then on the Lane Electric side of the rates thing, the rates that I showed up here, we are a rural utility already. So our service territory has roughly 8 customers per line mile. I think the EWEB area is a little bit more customers per line mile, but it's essentially our rates are built on how you operate in a rural service territory. So we think our rates really won't be impacted by bringing in the EWEB customers. So you'll see the same rates that we have today. That being said, and I don't know if Frank wants to address this because I don't want to get in front of their business, but all of us are facing a bonneville increase on October 1st of, I think it's 8.8% for the power supply part and almost 20% for the transmission supply part, which for us is 100% bonneville buyer, and EWEB isn't. They run their system differently, so it affects them differently. But for us, that's over a 10% rate increase for our cost of power, which is roughly 31 or 32% of our total cost. So it's a pretty significant cost driver when we're talking about budget and rates with our board right now. In fact, we have a board meeting on Wednesday, and I think the package we just sent out suggested we discuss having a 7% rate increase to help cover that bonneville rate increase. So just wanted to give you more on rates. Rural to rural, it's not going to affect us. The rate increase from bonneville is going to affect us, and I know from talking to some of the other GMs, because some of them are going as high as 12 and 13% with their rate increases because of some other cost drivers they have. Did you want to add anything on that?
Ours is a little bit different, as you mentioned. Much of that is because we supplement that with our own generation, and so it dilutes the direct impact from Bonneville. Our residential impact is just a little under 3%. It's going to be a 2.7% because of that. It's a percentage of a percentage of a percentage when you think about how much of the bill is the power supply itself, and then that we have some other resources that we rely on as well.
So the second part of my question is, I've been following this very closely about decommissioning the Lieber Canal. It runs right through the middle of my farm. And it looks like by all the estimations, it's at least $250 million to decommission, take the bridge out, decommission the canal, and everything else. I assume that's going to get passed on to your ratepayers at some point. And how are you going to amortize that over 20 years, or how would that affect the rates?
So at this point, it won't affect the rates, and part of that is because in discussions with the board a couple of years ago, when we were really looking at the decision, I'll just round it to 200 million. We wanted to, the board wanted to actually start saving for it. So rate increases started for that already. I think the total impact's about 8% overall across the entire customer base. And there's only a few percentage points of that left. So it's very small future impact at this point, since it's going to be, in essence, prepaid, pre-financed.
Another rumor going around here is you're going to decommission the Walterville Canal also. I wonder what your estimates of decommissioning that would be.
So we're hoping that, first of all, Walterville and Lieber are very, very different types of canals, different systems, different situations. Our goal would not to be decommission it at this point anyway. There's the license that we have runs through 2040. And so it really wouldn't be smart to decommission something that you can still get value out of. We are working with FERC, the regulator, on the designs of the potential remedies for the canal to make it safe according to their standards. And we'll know more about that over the next few months. We are going to give an update to the board in October, just kind of where some things stand on the dam safety issues. I will note that the generating facilities are not part of the distribution system we're talking about. I did try to offer it to Scott. But he
That's a neat.
was not, it wasn't part of the lunch deal or something, I guess, but,
It sounded like he was offering up dessert and I can't have sweets, so I said.
Nice try.
so we hope we can still get generation out of it. That's the hope. If it does become really impractical, we will have to look at the decommissioning option, just with open eyes at that point. It is gonna be a very different model than Leberg, and we're gonna have to take.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna be a lot less than Lieber.
I would think so. The canal structure is different, there's a lot of differences to it. There's also a longer tail race. So, I mean, there's different kinds of impacts, and we're gonna have to go through a really thorough process like we did on Lieber to look at all the different things that it could impact. But our hope would be to continue to get value through the license, which is 2040.
You're gonna be sorry you opened up that conversation.
I
Because
didn't open it up. That was Dana.
I know, he was throwing me a softball. I've followed this whole decommissioning scenario on the canal damn near from day one. What you're sounding like now is you're open to reconsideration with regard to the Lieberg powerhouse and the canal.
Not Lieber, only Walter Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that you could polyline Lieberg Canal, it's within the mileage difference and it's within the cost issue. And, and that would open up power to not only the power station, but to provide water to the salmon hatchery and people who have wells and draw water and have water rights out of that canal.
Yeah, the water management's a big piece of it, but also there's the seismic issues of the canal, which a liner doesn't help with. And so there's just a lot of choices there. The reality of it was that the power generation and the value of that versus the alternatives. We knew there was obviously lots of zeros and big numbers with this. And I do feel like the staff and the board did a really good analysis of it.
Based on the information available at the time.
And continuing information. I mean, there hasn't been, most of the process we're in now. Are you sure you don't want a generation facilities? Most of the work we're doing now is all of the studies that have to be done before you even file with FERC a decommissioning plan. So it's everything from transportation studies to environmental impacts to all the safety studies.
All the things that haven't been done yet, yeah. Okay. Look at that.
Good job. Hey, Scott, I'll throw $100 million in if you take it.
Write that number down because I got somebody I think will take it.
I have a couple of questions. On one of your maps, I was noticing that you say from Thurston Road up, isn't there still a small portion from Thurston Road to Springfield that would not transfer?
There's a little dam off of Thurston Road that will stay that will transfer to Springfield Utility District. There's also, and I didn't mention it, but it's all of Camp Creek, all the way over to Hayden Bridge, and actually 0.6 miles up Old Mohawk Road is part of the service territory we would be serving. So yeah, you're correct.
We're having similar discussions and analysis with Springfield. There's roughly 160 customers. And it is only along Thurston Road primarily, kind of back and forth along Thurston Road. Once it gets to Highway 126, that's part of Cedar Flat and what we're talking to Lane about. It creates a very clean division within the substations that feed those areas, where all of Walterville substation, all of Holden Creek substation would feed Lane and their territory. The substation at Thurston would be part of, in fact, Springfield Utility Board already has infrastructure in that substation, would take those 160 customers.
Gotcha. And then my other question is, for Lane Electric, on the EWEB side, if our power goes out, we've been able to somewhat go to this map online to see when our potential time is. It's never been really good at being caught up. You guys have anything like that?
Yeah, I don't think we have it quite yet, but we are putting in AMI or advanced metering. And as we put that in, we do have a mapping system and we'll be connecting it to the mapping system so we can give people an idea. I think one of the things is, as a smaller system, we actually just kind of do that through our website and our Facebook, where we know Blue River substation went out, and as soon as we find out, oh, it was Bonneville, we make the call to their dispatch and we try and get an estimate out in pretty short order. So we don't have quite as good a technology as EWEB does, but we certainly will try and get you out the same information you would have gotten as an EWEB customer.
So will we be giving phone numbers or email addresses so that you can get an immediate response? Or,
Yes, you'll get a response. Yes.
perfect, thank you.
Hopefully this doesn't get down in the weeds too far, but for things like unique situations, and I've got two of them. One is the Baldville Grange has got a couple of yard lights. And I think one of them we pay for, and there's the other one you have been taking care of, maintaining that type of thing. Is that type of a detail, something you're gonna be able to pick up and?
Yeah, it will just be a customer account issue that will move into our systems. We actually had that conversation this morning about technically how does that work? And we're still working on the technical, how do we take the data that comes off their system and stick it in our system? But yeah, it'll just be a transfer of customers. And as Frank mentioned earlier, if there's a deposit or other things, it will transfer also.
And it's something like an irrigation well, with you turning it off in, November and then turning it back on in April.
Yeah.
Because we don't use it during the winter, that type of thing. Is there gonna be a big charge to turn it back on, or?
I'm not positive on that. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. And solar, how, if we have residential solar and, how can we set that up? Can we backfeed and get credit, or is it all just gonna be used for our own house first and then go online?
I have a really good working relationship with Frank, and I hate to ruin it by telling you what our program is.
Go ahead.
You ruined my lunch at one point, so go ahead. No, it's all good.
So my understanding is that EWEB trues up monthly on solar, and you don't carry a credit forward into the following months. Our program is you carry a credit forward clear till March. And so if you overproduce more than your need in the summertime, with all the sunshine we have, and typically people have less load in the summertime, especially June, maybe not in August if you have AC, but at any rate, you do get to carry it forward, and we do a true up in March, which is similar to the true up they do on a monthly basis.
I was saying, it backfeeds, you do get a credit if you're making more than you're using.
Great.
If you have, Dean, do you have solar?
No, I don't have solar, but I know about solar, so, yeah, we give a credit, monthly credit rolls over from month to month, so, and it's credited at the price that we sell you the electricity for, so it's not even what we're paying for the electricity, it's what you're paying for the electricity. And then in March, as Scott says, then they're sort of all settling up and restarts again. So it's very nice to be able to basically bank the solar during the summer when the sun's out and high in the sky. And then basically pay down your bills for fall and into winter that way.
And what we find is by the time people, did that turn on?
It's still mixed in.
What we find is by the time people get to March, they've almost always used up all their credit. There's very few people that have much left by the time we get through the winter time.
Yeah, just comments about EWEB's truing up monthly, those are correct. There's some reasons for that, and we are working with the board just on how our rates are structured. But part of that is that some of our fixed costs that you would pay for, the lines, et cetera, some of those fixed costs are actually absorbed in the variable rate. And so being able to true up monthly for us allows us to pay for the fixed assets. So that's why it's looked, and that's a little bit why the basic charges are a little bit different between two utilities.
Yes.
I have more of an opinion than a question. I've lived in this McKenzie Valley for many, many years. And I've been a longtime customer of EWEB. And I saw EWEB come up here and build their hydroelectric power stations to make money off of our river. I've seen EWEB take our McKenzie water and sell it to Eugene. And now I kind of feel like you're selling us up the river. But that's okay. I'll be happy to go with Lane Electric. I even was part of their customer base for a season. And the fact that you even consider charging us more money than in town doesn't sit real good either. Because I know the last huge storm that we had, there was a lot more damage in the urban area than there was upriver. I live just below Leeburg and I had no damage whatsoever. So it goes back and forth. There are ice storms that hit the towns. There are ice storms and there's wind damage that hits up here. You would have to prove it to me that we cost more. I know there's mileage involved, but I just feel I've been a loyal customer for a long time and now you're through with us. I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure Frank does too, but I hope that I can check in with you in a couple of years and you'll say, you know what, this has worked out really nicely for us.
Well, I was happy to be a Lane Electric customer.
Thank you.
And he's right, I do appreciate it as well. And one of the things that I think we will continue to have a presence in the McKenzie Valley. We've invested an incredible amount in the watershed and the watershed protection. We expect that to continue. We also know that we have generation facilities up here. And so I don't feel like that we're abandoning the people of the McKenzie Valley. We are looking at this truly pragmatically with Lane Electric and saying, what's the best way long-term to serve the customers from an electric perspective? And so this isn't a fire sale. I didn't go to Scott and say, hey, what do you give me for it? I mean, that's why I say there's a lot of considerations here that we're going through and certainly appreciate your perspective on it. And we will continue to have a presence here.
Yeah, Frank, I just wanted to say, I've been a EWEB customer for a very long time, and I've been very happy with the service. And especially, doing this decommissioning project, your engineers have worked with me to keep water to my farm, and we've done splash dams in the canal. I've been real happy with the service I've been getting, so just from a happy customer, I'll say that. One other question I had, and I can't remember it now, so let somebody else know.
I know that you know where to find us,
Yeah.
so I'm sure you'll think of it.
I have all your guys' number on cell phone, so I'm pretty comfortable with you guys servicing my farm.
Thank you.
Competition, if you will. So you mentioned all the new poles that's up on the highway because people hit them.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, they don't replace them for fun. They replace them because people hit them a lot, right? So if you had to gauge, are you faster replacing the pole than EWEB is, you think? Are you faster putting the pole back in the ground and get the power back in EWEB?
I think we could have a great line group competition.
I like the competition.
Like that idea, maybe, you know what we ought to do? When we get ready to connect the two systems up here and we got 4 poles to put in, maybe we ought to have a little friendly competition and one of us buys the other one lunch, and I think I know what I'll be eating.
On a serious note,
You'll be eating crow is probably what you'll be eating, but
We do serve crow. In fact, Gene lives in crow.
There is, just to let people know, there is what's called Alignment Rodeo.
I've seen that.
Which is, if you ever go out to YouTube or look at videos, they have pole climbing contests. There's also similar competitions on the water side. How quickly can you tap a pipe and get it sealed up? And there's all kinds of competitions. We we'd be up for that.
Yeah, I even want to say, I think you beat him this year in that competition. I think. That's okay.
Wait a second here, just to clarify, is it me and Scott doing the poll?
But on that note, do you have enough equipment to take over this highway? I know you got people, but do you have enough equipment to handle more of the load?
Yeah, I think we do. We have been ordering a lot of new equipment recently, and we have some of the other equipment still hanging around that we use for when something's down or when we have extra work to do. So I think we're doing pretty good on equipment. I would say this question came up once before, because we are a smaller utility with fewer linemen. You know, if something happens in a limited area for EWEB, they've got a lot of resources to throw at it. And so what we do, and EWEB does it also, but all of us have a mutual aid agreement where we can draw crews from other areas. And you might have heard this last time I was here. I think I mentioned this, but one of the lessons I learned, having gone through 3 storms, which was horrible at Emerald, was at the last storm in 2019, I saw the snow coming down Sunday at 3 p.m. and I stayed up, and about Sunday at 9 p.m. I'm like, this is going to be a storm. And I called the operations manager and I said, you start getting the other crews in from other utilities and we're going to, oh, you guys, we're not going to have a relationship anymore. I said, we're going to get the crews before EWEB does. You make sure you make those calls.
This is a red phone for a reason. Yeah, I think one of the things, and storms have come up a couple times, they are disruptions, and as utilities, we deal with all kinds of disruptions. Storms tend to get the most attention. The anatomy of every storm is different. I think in one case, it can hit the city really hard, in another case, it can hit this area really hard. Some of them, like ice storms, are kind of the gift that keeps on giving, because it doesn't just, like a windstorm will just blow things down and then it gets calm and you fix it. An ice storm tends to last a little longer, even as things melt, they fall over. So they're all a little bit different. And in EWEB's case, where we have a really wide range of different kinds of ages of equipment, generations of equipment, there's a part of downtown Eugene, which is a very unique type of technology. So there's a lot of trade-offs in how we, when we get a disruption, how we have to handle it. And so, whereas in what Scott's talking about, a very consistent approaches, rural to rural, and we have a lot of different types of technology, including transmission and generation. And so I think the focus makes sense. The one thing that I was not used to until I got to this industry was just, we tease each other, but the collaboration between 2 utilities, not just 2 utilities, but all utilities. We aren't competitors in the sense that we're going to go in and steal business from a neighboring utility, and that's pretty unique. I came out of really competitive industries where this kind of exploration would be much different. And so it would be a lot like what can you buy it for? What do you sell it for? I mean, this kind of acquisition world is a lot different. And there will be times when I'm sure Scott will call on EWEB and EWEB will call on Lane Electric. That's the beauty of the industry.
Yeah, and it even goes to the investor owners. When we had the 2019 storm, we had at Emerald, we had 20 linemen, and for the storm, we brought in 70 more. So we had a pretty full house at that time. And as the storm wound down, PGE got done restoring power in the Salem area. And I happen to know the ops manager there from my days at Bonneville. And Larry called me up and he says, I've got crews in Salem. Before I pull them back to Portland, do you want them? So it is amazing. When we have storms, we're all on the same level and we all cooperate.
And it's very regional. I would say regional in particular. EWEB sent crews to Paradise, California, for example, for that. And they in California send, the local is better. It's more affordable, more available. But the bigger the issue, if we all in this area have a need, that footprint, the call out system for other crews gets a little wider and a little wider and a little wider. Last year, EWEB got calls from Florida. Now, we didn't end up sending crews, but they were so scarce in the southeast, it worked its way to the west.
Hi there. I came in a little late, but I have a lot of curiosity. I don't know how your boundaries are gonna happen, but I know there's some areas that have lane electric, and then the rest is EWEB, and along the river up, there's little spots, I think, of other coverage from other utility places, I'm not sure. But on the riverside, which I live, there's EWEB supposedly owns that river. And the railing, you know, off the freeway there, that is supposed to be owned by EWEB, I understand, and EWEB owns the culverts. I believe that's how it works. When I called ODOT to clean the culverts out, that was EWEB's responsibility. Is that going to change up? And I don't know the boundaries because I was late coming in. The boundaries of what Lane Electric is not going to be covering where EWEB is not. And when we call, it's going to be Lane Electric, I guess, at certain point, and I don't know, because I was like, so when you have problems with the culvert, which goes into the river, and it goes alongside of all the houses that are on the highway, is that going to be EWEB, or is that going to be Lane to solve that?
I would have to really look at the specifics of which culvert you're talking about. I think
It's all along the river, all along Leeburg Lake. All of that.
Okay, so there's pieces around Lieber, so it's associated with the distribution of electricity. Those easements, those responsibilities will likely go with Lane Electric. In your case, if there's some, EWEB owns 250 properties, including Lloyd Knox Park. There's a number of different places where we would have to just go in. That would be, we would continue to have that responsibility for those non-electric types of requirements. So without knowing specifically, but more than likely.
I would call EWEB.
Probably, yes.
Okay, the other question would be, on the river side, if there is problems, we normally would call Lane Electric, and if they would direct us to say, oh, no, we need to call EWEB. Our county people are, because usually it's just been EWEB. EWEB's been the call to everything if we're having a problem. Now we're going to take that responsibility away and give it to Lane. And is it Lane that I would first call, and then they'd redirect it to EWEB?
Yeah, I say that's power, yes.
That sounds like a water issue that EWEB will retain because they're gonna be retaining all of the facilities along the river. We're gonna be poles and wires, and if it's a poles and wires thing, then you're gonna call us.
Okay, so the other question would be, if you have promotionals and electricity, let's say that they're gonna give discounts to certain thing if you insulate your house or whatever, is that EWEB or Lane County that you would call?
If you are a Lane Electric customer, you would call Lane Electric, and we have very much similar programs because they're mostly laid out by Bonneville Power Administration. And we both get funding through Bonneville Power. I think we run very similar programs. There might be slight nuances on the payout based on our needs, but if you're a Lane Electric customer, you call Lane Electric for energy efficiency.
And when is this happening?
May 1st.
May 1st of next year. Right? It didn't already happen, did it?
How's the game going? EWEB to Lane, is that looking very positive?
The what?
The mood.
Yeah, I think generally, I don't know that I would describe the mood as good or bad. I think that, both utilities, the conversations I've had with individual commissioners, not as a board, I think there's an appreciation for how we're approaching it and trying to look at all these issues. I think that, you know, Scott mentioned that his crews were open and excited about it. We're looking at it very pragmatically as well. I think it's positive overall.
Yeah, I think the mood from the employee standpoint is very positive. They're very excited about getting at it. They're ready to start figuring out today. And I'm like, you know, we got work to do today. And the board has not made a decision yet, and we haven't given them enough information to make a decision. So we got some ways to go before that. But at this point, they're all pretty excited about serving this area for sure, both inside the building and the folks outside the building.
Based on the EWEB customers that I've heard from, we're enthusiastically supporting the move.
Okay, well, good. I hope you feel the same way after we. Someone asked me, what's my biggest worry? And I said, I think the biggest speed bump we'll likely have. I said two things. One is we have a windstorm the day after we take it over, and that'll be a bad outcome. But the other one is there's gonna be a lot of billing data, and I don't doubt at all that we're gonna have some bills that don't go as smoothly as we'd like.
And that, you know, it wasn't really included in the schedule, but in working with our boards, looking at these details, we will find differences. For example, we have loan programs that might be different, and we'll have to figure out how to settle those. And there's a lot of details. And then if it looks like the contractual piece, the board piece is going well, we'll know that here, November, December. There will be a lot of customer communications between, you know, February, March, April, as we get closer with all of the kinds of details on how to handle different situations. So we're kind of taking it step by step. It looks very positive at this point, but we also know that there's lots of details left and some pretty major hurdles to work through relative to our respective boards. And as well as there's a few other regulatory things. One of them that we didn't mention was Bonneville Power does play a role in this. We have to work with Bonneville Power to get what is now EWEB's allocation of federal energy transferred to Lane Electric and the appropriate amount of load that goes with that. The Oregon PUC also has to approve any territory changes in the state of Oregon. They don't typically regulate things like our rates, but they do have certain things that they require of things and issues like this. So there are some regulatory hurdles to work on. The PUC can take anywhere from 3 to 5 months based on this type of transfer. So these are all things that we're trying to figure out now so that it does look promising. We can.
But you're not regulated by the Oregon PUC.
We're not regulated by the PUC in most things. We are regulated by our own, in our case, commissioners, or in Scott's case, directors. There are a few things like this that you have to go through that process. They also have a few reliability standards. So it is a regulated industry generally. So they come out and inspect our territory. They'll do reliability audits, look for clearances, equipment condition, that type of thing. And so they do that with even consumer-owned utilities, but generally we're governed by our own boards.
Going back to the storms, I've been here long enough that I've lived through several of the storms. And I'm wondering if either one of you, I know it's horrendously expensive, but if either one of you have plans to start trying to put lines underground incrementally. If not, I know we can't do it all the way, but incrementally at least.
Well, we actually, I know they do also, but yes, we do, and we have been doing undergrounding of lines, and you can see it sometimes when you drive up and down 126, you'll see where there's no overhead wires. Well, that's because we undergrounded it. Some of that money was provided to us by FEMA after the fires 5 years ago. There's also a big bunch of money there right now that we haven't been able to access to even do more of that work. But as we put together a 10-year engineering plan, and we're doing that right now for our current system, and we're doing some placeholder money for the EWEB McKinsey in the event that becomes part of our system. And that is a lot of what we look at. The other thing we look at is, and I know that EWEB's doing the same thing, we all are, but we're getting a lot more aggressive about vegetation management. And I'll be going back to DC next month to talk with our legislators about a bill called Fix Our Forest Act. And a lot of what's in Fix Our Forest Act is giving us more ability to trim out right-of-ways and remove hazard trees, take bad limbs without going through such a cumbersome process with some of the federal entities we work with. So we're all working to improve reliability, and we have plans to do that.
There's two sets of question. Okay, so pink, black hoodie, green.
I just have a quick one. Thing with the storms, would there ever be any preemptive shut-offs for a storm that might be coming up?
Well, probably not for a storm. We have in the past done what we call public safety power shutoffs, PSPSs, for fire danger. We had that discussion at work this morning. We feel we're towards the end of this fire season, and we did get asked once or twice to do a PSPS. We've adjusted our system. I know EWEB has also, to have some automated reclosers that keep us from having to do PSPSs. That is absolutely the idea of last resort for us. And we hope not to have to do them. I think we can get there, but there may be times where a fire is right upon us that we'll do a PSPS for the safety of the firefighters. So that's kind of where we've gotten at as far as doing the PSPSs, when it's the safety of the fire officials, because they're going to be in there and they can't be fighting a fire with live electricity.
Yeah, we, in a similar way, in fact, we probably would do it for windstorms. We would do it if there's specifically, it's part of our wildfire mitigation. In fact, this area experienced a preemptive shutoff from EWEB, I want to say in the fall of 23, where the condition, not just the condition, so you get a red flag warning, that's the warning. But when we start to see indications on the system that we are experiencing high winds, dryness, heat, all those things, it is part of our process. It's really the last thing that we want to do. We change our settings, our operating setting, make our system be very sensitive. A lot of things we do before that point, but we did do one here a couple of years ago. We also know that causes other problems. It causes issues with pumps, communication systems. It's not a free thing where you just turn it off. It's also, when you turn it off, you don't just turn it back on. You have to control the lines. It's a very dangerous situation with dryness. So it takes us 2 minutes to turn it off and about a day to turn it back on. So, but yeah, we do have that specifically for wildfire mitigation.
Over the last 5 years, us utilities have done a lot to try and get away from having to do PSPSs with vegetation management and with the automated reclosers. And we're also working closely together. We have coordination meetings before the winter season and the summer season between all of us utilities that are willing to participate. We have a couple here that don't, one's State Pacific, and that's fine, that's their business. But we do coordinate quite a bit, and we also coordinate a lot with the fire officials and the weather officials. So we do watch it very closely. And I think Frank's right. We haven't seen a strong wind condition. That could be something that could make us implement one. We hope we don't get in that position though.
For those of us that have easements on our property, do you have a plan, or are you still working on that plan to reach out to us for those easements? And then about the aggressive vegetation management, I just want to go on record saying I'm very pro aggressive vegetation management all around our power line. So that would be great.
Yeah, the easement, I want to say we have several hundred easements. And so we're going to have to look how to handle those. I don't know if it's a very simple sort of administrative filing, of a successor, EWEB, but now there's a successor, or if there's some other administrative piece to it. So I'm not quite so sure. I think there is a growing sensitivity to the fact that trimming trees and vegetation is a safety issue. I think for decades, it was probably considered more of an inconvenience, annoyance issue. And I will tell you that most people love aggressive tree trimming on their neighbors' trees. They don't always have that same attitude on their own trees. Sounds like you do. That's
Take it
great.
down to the ground and 10 feet away. I don't care.
That's great. I wish I could pull you to a lot of different visits that I go to. But I think it is a safety issue, and both utilities are mandated to have certain clearances. It is federal law that we do that. And so we are getting more aggressive on how often we do it, as well as the amount that we do. So, because it's a pretty significant safety issue.
Yeah, there's some pretty ugly trees along the highway that should have been taken all the way out.
It's an ugly issue. Yeah.
Well, I think we've gone for a while. If there aren't, maybe we could just break up and if that individual customer questions for some of us, feel free, or we could mingle around.
One more. I have a question for Frank.
Hold on. Okay. Two more.
One, when should we expect to know whether the boards have agreed that we are definitely moving forward?
Probably late this year.
Okay, and then the next question is once we do in May, how soon should we expect to start seeing smart meters go in?
Great question. So we're implementing the smart meters throughout our whole service territory we have now. We have about 40 to 800 of them in for 13,000 total. Our goal is to have it done before May 1st for our current system, so that then if we're taking over the EWEB system, May 1st, May 2nd, we are going to have them ordered, and we're already looking into it and kind of making sure the lead time works and everything, because lead times have gotten kind of goofy. And there's some other equipment we'd need to buy, but we'd hope to start in early May if we ended up taking over the EWEB service territory, hopefully knock it out in 2 months.
Okay. And if you have a shut off switch for the generator, does that mess with the smart meters at all, or?
Not really.
Okay.
One thing you didn't cover at all is what is EWEB charging Lane Electric for all the infrastructure, not the water generation, but you've got millions of dollars worth of poles, lines, transformers and all that.
Millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Are
a,
you listening into our conversation at the back of the room? Because we're actually trying to get to that number right now.
I think there's just a couple of things that we're really wanting to make sure that we consider. EWEB and EWEB's customers, including you, have invested in those assets through the years. And so they're not free. They are worth something. We also know that the way that assets are typically paid for is that they're depreciated over time. And so we have to understand what the depreciated value of those assets is. And as much as I'd like to be able to say that's all in a computer somewhere, it is in a computer somewhere. It's just in very different pieces. And so
And probably as you put it into the system, and we're the same way. We didn't think about this area needs to be cordoned off and we need to track just this area. So they're trying to extract that, and it's tough.
yeah, we're extracting that. We also want to do this in a way that maintains the value and doesn't provide a transfer of burden. So it is probably going to be somewhere between $5 and $10 million for the assets somewhere.
And like you said, we've already paid for those assets to customers. So we'll be paying for it again for Lane Electric, it sounds like.
Well, I don't think you will. And so what Frank is trying to accomplish is that it's rate neutral,
Okay.
right? So they already have those assets at the depreciated book value, and they're collecting a certain amount each year. That depreciated book value will just be on our book, and we'll collect that exact same amount of depreciation each year that you would have paid under EWEB will be the same you would pay under Lane Electric. If we did.
That's a good way of saying, whatever we have left to pay for it is transferred. Yeah.
And then the question for you, Scott, is, EWEB's been a very good member of our community and helped our fire department out in many ways and the finances. And, will Lane Electric carry on that tradition and give us free rate at our fire stations?
Don't commit.
You're looking at meter bills. The bigger issue is we are very involved in the communities. So I don't know if any of you went, but Blue River had a 5-year commemoration for the fires from 5 years ago. I was up at that. We sponsored part of it. I had several people come up to me and thank us for participating to help fund that event. We do a lot of community outreach and involvement.
You see, Lane Electric, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, EWEB's been a great partner over the years. They pay us a certain amount for protecting the river also, and they have an awful lot of land here that we provide our protection to.
We do one more question, maybe?
There's some of us that pays EWEB like $300 a month all year long. Can we do that with the Lane Electric?
Yes.
Because, you know, in the winter time, your bill is really, really high, and then in the summertime,
Yes.
it's, okay.
$300 a month, holy cow.
How does she do that?
What, do you have a 3,000, almost 4,000 square feet house?
Just one question. This is out
It's
of,
not about culverts, is it?
no,
Okay, good.
this is about, how did this all come about? Who offered who what? And how did we become a step?
Well, you came in late, you came in late.
Just
so you
this
missed the
little
lead.
bitty place up here,
Yeah.
all of a sudden got sold off.
But
Did we ask for it?
this started 14 years ago.
14 years
Yeah,
ago?
So you missed the start and
I
so
did,
I'm gonna drag
I did.
everyone through it. This isn't a new topic. But how it came about was when I posted I was becoming a GM, Frank said, let's do lunch.
Yeah,
You guys
it's,
thought we
it's,
should be sold off, huh?
well, it had been talked about very seriously, like I said, 14 years ago originally. And there were a lot of details that were learned at that time. The situations of the different utilities that have changed. I think we also see some efficiencies out of it, both utilities and the customers. And one of the things that we've heard for a long time is the importance of having direct voting representation within a utility organization, which you don't have with EWEB. And so there's just a number of reasons. Once knowing Scott, I just said, let's talk about does this make sense or not? And what would it take to have it make sense or not? And so, that's where we are, and we're looking at it, and we'll be talking to our boards about it.
If you didn't get the job, if this still be happening.
You know what? That's a good question. Probably not. Some of this is because you have to be able to sit down with someone you trust and say, well, what about this or what about that? And you have to be able to explore really honestly. And when you do honest explorations, when you sit down and you have to say, well, we do this well, we don't do that well. Well, you do that well and you don't do that well. When you're thinking about it from a customer perspective. So quite honestly, probably not.
We are brothers.
We do.
And after the whole meeting, we're gonna trade our shirts back and forth.
Now, you don't really know who you've been talking to. Well, were you gonna pose your own?
No, I just was gonna ask Holly to put the last slide up because it has the websites on it and everything. So if you wanted to send an email with some more comments and questions, if you guys close out.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for your questions and your interest and your comments. We are really trying to look at this from a lot of different perspectives, including how we think the customers can be serviced. I'm glad it's an organization like Lane Electric. I think we feel good about the relationship, the quality of work that they do. And we also know that we're gonna, as EWEB, continue to have a presence up here. And so thank you for your questions. There'll be more information coming over the next few months. And then if it looks like it is something that's gonna happen, there'll be a lot of customer communications.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. And this will be up to the board of directors, and we have a lot of information we need to still glean out and get in front of them for us to have that decision come about. But we appreciate you coming out tonight, and our staff is excited about the opportunity to work with all of you in the coming years if we get to that point. And my last thing is, there's a lot of food back there. Please take some with you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
My go box.